Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Steve Kinney. I'm a producer and engineer. A few months back, I made a 3-part series on how to create a song with just an Apollo solo and Luna. And the artists liked it so much that they decided that they wanted to release it. So I wanted to make a video updating everything that's happened since then. And I also wanted to make sure that I documented what happens between part 3 and the finished product. And that's what this video is. Now, if you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, make sure you check them out because they're really cool. They're pretty informative. They go over the creative process. They go over the technical process. So there's certainly a lot that you can get from those videos, and there's gonna be way more that you can get from this video. So make sure you stay tuned to watch it all. But if you're new to the channel, make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know your thoughts on the song, and make sure you check out the artists as well on Spotify and show them some love on Instagram. Their links are gonna be in the description below. Now, it's a rainy Saturday night here in Nashville, but in the morning, we are flying out to Florida to film a music video, which is part of this video. I know many of you are artists, many of you are producers, and I figured that it might be pretty useful for you guys to see some of that as well. Because it's a pretty big part of the music industry today. It's not just creating your song, it's not just mastering your song, it's the whole shebang. It's making the album art, it's creating the video, it's doing the behind the scenes. We're gonna go through a lot of that, and we're also gonna be going over what I've done with the mix, the final touches on the mix, what I've done for mastering, and how I make sure that my master is competitive. Make sure that you guys stick around because this video is completely packed full of content. So I know that this video is a little bit different than my typical video, so if you like it, make sure that you let me know in the comments below, but for now, enjoy the rest of the video. You ready for the beach?
I'm ready for the beach.
All right, so it's 6 in the morning and we're traveling to the airport, and something that occurred to me that I think is a really good idea to do when you're a content creator is to make sure that you have an itinerary. And so we've mapped out the next 2 days because that's all we have to film. So as soon as we land, we're gonna location scout on location, and we're gonna have 4 sunsets to film in while we're there. And pro tip, when you're traveling, save your Starbucks cup from the night before and skip the lines at the airport. Make coffee at home.
5 o'clock, we get here at 5:30. That will give us 2 hours.
It's gonna get hot.
Like when you're filming, it's still gonna be like 20.
This is kind of a dream come true location because you got 3 in 1. So we'll be able to get a lot done, and we'll be coming back out here at sunset. Whatever we don't get, we'll know tonight. So tomorrow we'll have a lot more freedom and time to do what we need to do.
Hey guys, how you doing? Oh my gosh, this is my first time of actually seeing the beach here in Destin, and it is absolutely amazing. White sand, the waves are almost non-existent, which means I could float all day, and the water is so blue.
So the more that we walk around the boardwalk, we're discovering that this is like a filming landmine. We've discovered so many different cool spots to film at. So this is gonna be a great video, I'm excited.
When, before summer starts to fall, blows up, we're going to come down here and buy a good majority of these properties along the beachfront in Destin. It's going to be fantastic. And as long as one of them's blue, I'll be happy. Oh, we love waiting.
Okay.
At 2 o'clock, you can't open the door until it's 4 o'clock.
Took a minute to hit the beach, and now I'm prepping for the shoot. It's probably about in 2 hours or so once the sun starts to set. And I'm taking this time to prep my lenses, make sure they're clean, and make sure that I'm bringing everything that I need to bring.
Blingy McBlingerson here, look at this. Hey, I feel like I'm going on set with Tina Turner.
So I mean, this was the more fancy, I actually do have a blue denim jacket.
Katrina Burgoyne, sponsored by the New York Giants. Troy Kemp, sponsored by Peter Alexander.
Ew, yep.
Follow up. smashing success. We will be back with more tomorrow to do the final touches, the final shots for the video. And we are just exhausted. We're ready to grab some food. Anyway, yeah, here's the shots. Just got back in, and now it is time to unload all the footage, organize it, prep it for edit, and also get some much needed sleep. I had a blast in Florida. Wish I could have stayed there longer, but this train's got to keep on rolling. So I'm gonna make some food, get to it in the morning, and I'll show you guys the results here shortly. Okay, let's talk about the mix. First off, this is the first song that I'm going to be releasing that I made completely start to finish in Luna. A really interesting, important thing to point out is how analog it really sounds. I was absolutely blown away with that. I couldn't be happier about that bit. The second really important thing is that, again, the song was made entirely on an Apollo solo. We tracked and recorded the acoustic guitar with an Aston Spirit and with an old 515 SB Shure microphone. Really cool sounding, basically kind of 57-ish kind of thing. And the Aston Spirit is absolutely wonderful on acoustic guitars. We also used that specifically by choice for the vocals as well. And we did all of this in my previous living space, which was down in the Gulch. It was in this just studio apartment. Not ideal. Now, the song really started out as kind of a bit of an experiment and a bit of a project to show what you can do with an Apollo solo. And once the artists decided that they wanted to release this song, they wanted to do a music video, we then had a bit of a deadline crunch. And in order to meet that deadline, I decided I needed to speed up my workflow just a hair rather than going through and bouncing tracks. And that bit of the workflow that you saw in the first 3 parts of the series, I really needed to just jump to my X8 just to speed the process along. But all of this could have been done to these final steps, the final touches really could have been done on that Apollo solo as well, bouncing tracks down, printing and committing along the way. So that's the only reason that this was really finished out on the X8. The second thing that was changed is we added a poppy instrument over the choruses, and we also added a really, really subtle guitar lead before the bridge, just to kind of fill that space a bit better. So let's actually jump into the project now. This is the track in its entirety. Yeah, I've got my buses here at the top. I've got my drums right through here. All of these tracks are just the drums, and it's printed. We've got the acoustics. Not a lot of stuff has changed on this section. Where we start to see some real changes is down here at the bottom. We've got our banjos, and this is really cool. This is the only thing that was done out of the box as far as processing. So here is what we've got. Here's the banjo sound itself. Very cool. And then when you go into the choruses, you'll hear it just come right back in. So let's take a look at the processing on these banjos. The instrument itself is a Deering 6-string banjo, or otherwise known as a ganjo. And I'm not a banjo player, but I can play banjo-esque kind of leads on the guitar. So I got a 6-string banjo, and it's tuned just like a guitar. Really makes the process super easy. And you may have heard of a famous guitar player that also utilizes this method by the name of Keith Urban. If not, I highly encourage you check out Keith Urban, because he might be famous one day. So anyway, what kind of processing do we actually have going on? Well, we've got the two main tracks here, and nothing crazy special going on with them. I am high passing quite a bit of stuff that I just don't need. No compression on the two actual tracks. Then what I did is I sent those tracks out of the box into my Dolby 361As to really get the high end and that percussive element of those banjos to really cut through the mix. So let's just listen to these on their own real quick. So you can hear it's pretty low in the mix right there, but let's now add in the blended 361 sound, and you're gonna really hear the attack start to come out. So the body's just kind of tucked underneath there with the original signal. The 361s are really kind of keeping it in this really present area, and that really helps it cut through in the mix, especially being that the mix is so busy. That was the biggest struggle with the banjo. So we're gonna also touch on that in a second. That is to say, making the part. So here's what we're doing for the effects. We're taking that banjo signal and we are doing some stuff to it. So the first thing that we're doing is adding this modulation, giving it like a bit of this spacey kind of weirdness to blend in with those 361s, which is a dry signal. Then we're also adding a bit of delay and more modulation to it. And finally, we are compressing quite a bit of it and also blending that compression in with the original dry signal. So it's getting a little bit more of that, like that meat that's kind of sitting really nice and compressed, blending in with the attack. So a lot of processing really actually going on for such a simple signal, at least you would think. So pretty cool, definitely wanted to touch on that. So here it is with all of the processing. Really cool. Pretty proud of that one. I think it came out great. But now let's talk about actually making the banjo, the Ganjo sound. I called this the Great Ganjo Debacle of 2021. So once Troy and Kat agreed that they wanted to add these little final touches and then release the song, I didn't have a Ganjo at the time. I didn't have a banjo, anything like that. So naturally I reached out to some session musicians, all of which did a phenomenal job. But this is where I started to run into some problems. See, working with session musicians and flying tracks back and forth became pretty difficult. What would happen is I would have a session musician make an awesome performance, but maybe he wasn't the best at miking his particular instrument, and as a result of that I wouldn't be able to fit it in the mix. So I'd have to, you know, kind of keep going back and forth. Hey, can you give it a go again? Can you give it another pass? Can you do this? And that became very, very frustrating, very difficult. There's a lot of ways you can get a hold of session musicians. What I'm going to say about this track, it's a great example of go out and be a voice in your community, find other session musicians in your town, build relationships with them, and work with them directly. To the session musicians that did play on this track but didn't make the cut, thank you so much for your hard work. It sounded great. Your performances were awesome. Just sonically, I needed to cater it quite a bit more. Anyways, again, great job. So the lead guitar comes in right in the second turnaround after the chorus here, and let's just listen to it. Very cool, just nice and crunchy, nice and distorted, but we're doing some interesting stuff here. So I printed that sound on the way in. So we can't really deep dive that, but it's pretty straightforward. It's one of the Marshall plugins with a Rat Proco distortion on it and a Les Paul. Then I'm sending it over to one of my favorite delays, which is the Galaxy Tape Echo. We've got a bit of reverb, spring reverb. We've got a little bit of echo there. Just panned a little bit one way, reverb pan the other. I use that technique all the time. I think it sounds absolutely killer. And the thought process behind that part is that I have a lead hook already right there, and I didn't want to take that out. I didn't want it to be so big of a solo that it was distracting to the song. So I'm actually just kind of playing off the leads. Let's listen to the lead guitar now with that solo. So really cool when they kind of play off each other and land in a similar spot. They kind of just make it really beefy, really big, very spacious, and that's awesome. A lot of movement there. But it's not too distracting that it takes away from the rest of the song. So that's very important. Of course, in that bridge section, we also got some stuff going on with the Banjo. Let's take a look at what's going on there. Just an accent piece. So let's now add some of the other elements in here.
With a cool breeze drinking, my hand waves breaking.
Pretty cool. I think that really kind of fills that empty space before the O's come in, which the background singers in the track. Now in the second verse, there is one more additional thing going on here that I don't think made it into part 3, which is this verse synth layer. So let's listen to that. Really simple, just adds this really nice layer underneath everything else. Very, very ambient sound. As far as processing, what I'm doing with that is, so first it's analog brass and winds, one of their sounds, default sounds. I messed with it a little bit, nothing crazy there. Just hitting it with a 1176, nothing crazy there, just kind of slamming it. And then I'm also hitting it with the Pro Q with quite a hard high pass. I just didn't want any of the low end in there, didn't need it. Some people will kind of scoff at the idea of being so aggressive with those high passes. I don't mind it. I tweak it to where I need it, and then that's that. So let's listen to this with some other elements here. So you really hear that that's really just adding a layer underneath, and it lands in a similar spot as some of the other parts of the song. And I think that that's really what kind of keeps it underneath and tucked away and out of the way. So now that we've got that arrangement just right where we want it, we added those final layers, those final touches to really kind of bring the arrangement to the next level. What did we do mix-wise, and how did we get it so analog-y and so big and so open sounding? I think this track really highlights just how realistic and how awesome sounding Luna can be with its summing features, the tape summing, the console summing. That's what's bringing this to the next level. So let's take a quick look at what we did here. Routing-wise, all of the electric guitars here are all going to an electric guitar bus, and what we're doing is we're hitting it with the API summing and being very generous on the headroom control. If you're not sure what headroom does, as you start to increase the headroom control in Luna, you're decreasing the headroom available and simulating it kind of like clipping and getting that analog distortion that you would normally hear. I like to use that feature to kind of tame the dynamics and also get that saturation that you would get from that analog console. Does an absolutely awesome job. Then all we're really doing from there is doing some very simple tone shaping. I've got a Neve 1081 EQ, just a little bit of sculpting and vibe character. Then we've got an LA2A to kind of deal a little bit more with the dynamics, not doing anything all too crazy with it. Then from there, the next thing that we're doing is, again, just kind of really aggressive high passing at the really, really subharmonic areas. Now, the reason I do this is because as you introduce this API summing, starts to add that noise and that kind of weird subharmonic stuff back in, and I just want to get rid of some of that. So that's all I'm doing there with the fab filter. If you're looking at these buses, one thing you will see is that I've got an acoustic guitar bus, and what do I have on it? API summing. I have my drum bus is one of the very few that doesn't have the summing on there, and that's because it's already got so much character in the sound that I didn't really want to do any more to it. Vocal bus, same thing. As a matter of fact, we've got headroom cranked on the banjo bus. We've got headroom cranked on every one of them. So I'm really getting that API console sound out of this mix. It's shaping those dynamics by reducing the headroom and just kind of clipping. The next important Luna feature that you will see that really influenced this mix is the oxide tape and the Studer tape sounds. That's across like all of the guitars, all of the vocals, with the exception of the acoustic guitar. Then all of the buses are running to this final master bus, which has API summing on it, and it also has the ATR 102. My settings for the ATR 102 is the 468 1-inch tape with 15 IPS. And I believe that's actually a preset. I don't think I really changed anything to that. The analog sound of this song is due entirely to Luna. This is the reason I switched to Luna. You're not going to convince me to go back to Pro Tools. You're not going to convince me to go back to Logic. This is where it's at. Now, there was one thing that I kind of stumbled upon when I was doing the mastering in this mix, which was that really nice EQ that Logic has, you know, that graphical EQ where you can do those crazy cuts. That's why I went out, I picked up Fab Filter. I don't know why I hadn't had Fab Filter earlier in life. Something I just always put off. But I picked up Fab Filter, and how I'm using it is just some very interesting places here. I'm using it like to do those really aggressive high passes, which you saw on this verse layer. I'm doing just a little bit of, you know, mid-range, low mid-range stuff on the vocals. Nothing crazy. Then we go over to the vocal bus, and you'll see another pretty aggressive high pass. Just kind of get that really sub stuff out of the way. I believe I even do the same thing on the acoustic guitar. One thing I noticed is when I did it on the banjo bus, I didn't like the way it sounds. Make sure that when you're doing your mixes and your final mastering touches, that you are not just doing things because you think you should do them, but you're really using your ears to determine whether or not you need to do it in the first place. So Fab Filter came in pretty handy in the mastering stage, the final mix stage. Critical feedback from Troy and from Kat. I made sure to take that into account, but the number one thing that I needed to make sure that I did from part 3 to now is get the song sonically loud enough to be competitive in the market. So we need to touch on the mastering chain and talk about what I did to get it to be competitive. So now overall on this mix, I'm controlling a ton of dynamics throughout the track. I'm shaping the dynamics on the drum bus. I'm shaping the dynamics in plenty of places on the vocal bus to really get it manipulated where I wanted it to be. Shaping it a little bit on the guitar bus. We shaped it a bit with the banjos. Once it hits the master bus, you've got the API summing doing a bit of it. You've got the master tape section doing a bit of dynamic shaping and compression. Then we have the API 2500. That's doing a little bit of the work. And it hits the SSLG bus, and every bit of it is just kind of pushing it in the direction that I want it to go. But the final stage of this puzzle is really this Oxford limiter. And all I'm really doing here is I'm just hitting the input gain a little bit. I'm using this enhance curve, which I believe if you read about this, this is kind of doing an Oxford inflator kind of thing. And then it's just doing its final brick wall limiting at -1. I actually go a little bit lower than -1. I believe the threshold, yeah, -1.14. Nothing specific there. I'm just trying to keep the intersample peaks from going any higher than -1. So as far as the chain, that's the chain. And it's important to note that because let's just take a listen here, and hopefully this doesn't actually clip my screen recording here. This is the mix before the final compression, before the final limiting. Let's take a listen to it.
Let's get to rockin' them flip-flops, cool shades on, day drinking. Jumping off the old pier, diving right in like a holiday fling, heart sinking.
Oh, it's been a long year, let's kick it in gear and
So it's pretty close. It's not like anything drastically different happens when you listen to this. Let's listen to what it sounds like before the limiting.
Let's get to rockin' them flip-flops, cool shades on, day drinking. Jumping off the old.
So it certainly gets much louder. That's where you kind of get that loudness, that punch. That's coming in on this final bit of compression. Now it's important to note that this is different with every song. I'm not doing the same mastering chain every time. This is just how this one played out. And then with the limiting, I've got this limiter, and I had a second one, but this was kind of like an A-B thing. So I have the second limiter turned off, and that doesn't make it into the final export. Now we need to touch on two really important tools that I used throughout the entirety of the mix. The first one being Vocalign Loudness Meter. I highly recommend this thing. The way that this works is it basically tracks your intersample peaks, your true peak, tracks your LUFS if you're very into that, which I am. So a really important thing to know when you are mixing and mastering is that Spotify, Apple Music, they all have their LUFS targets, but that level doesn't really mean a whole lot. What matters is how does your mix sound. Now, again, most mixes are different for me. As far as where I like to have my songs at for LUFS, it goes entirely off of how it feels. Does it feel loud enough? Does it hit good? Then awesome. This particular track, let's take a look what happens when we monitor what's going on here. Let's go right into the chorus here.
Those fireflies like diamonds dripping in the sky. Soak up the good times, sunshine until I start to fade. Skin deep in the moonlight, just like beach bum renegades. Dial up your rap for a minute, throw a margarita in.
Spin a senorita on the dance floor.
Let's make it our mission to lose.
So you can see that Vocalign is sitting absolutely slammed. It's crushed, but it still feels and sounds good. Now what's going to happen is when this song gets uploaded to Spotify, Spotify is going to pull this down to where it's playing back. It's literally going to pull it down like 7 dB, right, to get it to negative 14 dB LUFS, say if we're just talking about the chorus here. But because of how compressed the track actually really is, the perceived loudness is going to be much higher than if I had more dynamics in the track. So when you're mastering your tracks and you're wondering why your tracks aren't as loud as the next one, this is why. It's perceived loudness. And that's probably a whole nother video in and of itself for me to do. It's a very tedious topic, and I want to take my time making that video right for you guys, but I just wanted to touch on this. The second bit of information is, how do you know where your mix sits in relation to other mixes? I used a tool called Finalizer. It's TC Electronics, and you can just go to the website. They have a free version, and then they have a paid version. The paid version is like mastering software on its own. It's the same tool as you'd have in a DAW, with the exception of like being able to compare your mixes to other pro mixes or reference mixes. I played around with it. I prefer to master inside of my DAW, but you certainly could use Finalizer, the software itself. I think it's like 200 bucks. Sounds pretty good. It's got some useful tools. Vocalign Loudness Meter definitely helps me get a sense of where my track is sitting at loudness wise. And as far as actually getting the track loud enough, I just get it sounding right. That's what I want to do. So let's take a quick look at Finalizer and see what's going on with this track. I think I just log in. Yeah, analyze track. All right, cool. So this is what this software kind of looks like. You can see that it's got this kind of like short-term loudness meter, kind of generally shows you the track as a whole. Then it's got this thing they've dubbed compressometers, nothing crazy. It's just saying how compressed is your track. It shows you the LUFS again. You can see that this is quite a loud track. Not a lot of dynamics, which again is weird because the song still feels good when you're listening on speakers, you're listening in a car. Still hits you and it still feels like it gets bigger at times, but it's really not that dynamic. Then it shows you the spectral meter. This is just, again, general. So let's compare this to a mix that's done really, really well and something in the same genre too. So let's compare this to some country music. She Got the Best of Me by Luke Combs, right? Let's compare. Very, very similar. If we're comparing these, you've got the same LUFS, negative 8.1. Their true peak is higher and She Got the Best of Me, and mine's a little bit more compressed. But then you look at the spectral meter and They're very, very similar, very similar. The differences that you find there, it really pertains to the key of the song and some of those sonic choices relating to that particular song. So those are never going to match identically, but it does give you some sort of sense of, is my 17K ridiculously high or completely out of balance? Is my bass ridiculously out of balance? So this tool, in combination with Ulean and also in combination with the Sonics limiter and just mixing and arranging, this is how you're going to get your song to that competitive mastering area. At least that's how it works for me. That's how I work, and that's how it worked in this song. So let's jump back into Luna. The final piece of the puzzle for me when I mix is Sonarworks. I've been using it for really ever since I got my new pair of headphones. I didn't trust them. I wasn't used to them. I needed to retrain my ears, and it works. While I have Sonarworks up, that allows me to simulate a flat response, so I know what's going on in the mix relative to like perfect speakers. It also allows me to compare them to different environments, like say a car, for example. Being able to switch in real time really makes a difference, at least for me, to be able to kind of have some sort of reference without jumping back and forth to my car or bouncing mixes down and being frustrated. And the most important part is that if I have this nice simulated flat response when I'm getting my sounds, I know where I'm starting from. Really, really important when you're mixing, when you're mastering, to know what you're hearing and having some sort of mental calibration to some particular point. If you're just so used to your headphones and you build off that, pretty cool. But what happens if you're really used to those headphones and you just can't hear anything below 80 hertz? Well, then, you know, you're gonna be missing that, and that could throw your mixes off. It could throw your LUFs off. So very important. This is very helpful. Highly recommend it. And then of course, when I go to export, I turn off everything after the limiter, the final limiting, so it's just the audio chain itself, and then I export it down into WAV format for release. And there's one more really important step, is that you need to also be exporting an instrumental only version. This is going to ensure for your artists later on when they do interviews, or if they make, you know, behind the scenes footage, that you can add the song underneath it without any distracting vocals. Always have to be doing that. I think I mentioned that in another video. So to just quickly recap, Luna, amazing. The analog sound from their summing features really made this song sound so analog and console-like. Fab filter came in really handy when making those final touches, really cut out that really sub areas. Sonarworks, immensely helpful when it came to actually doing the final mix, along with Ulean, and being able to check out my mixes relative to other pro mixes with Finalizer.com. For everybody out there watching who's an independent artist, for everybody out there watching that oohs and ahs over the fancy gear, you don't need it. It's all arrangement, it's all getting good sounds on the way in, and it's all working hard to focus to make sure you're making the sounds that you want to make. We have the tools to do it in just this little tiny Apollo solo. So get out there and create some awesome music. Now this song has just released, so please go give it a listen on Spotify before summer starts to fall. It's available now on Spotify, Apple Music, all the things. Go show their Instagram pages some love, give them a follow. Katrina, Burgoyne, Troy Kemp. Their links are in the description. Please support them. They've worked really hard on this song. We've put a lot of content out for you guys, and it would really mean a lot if you went and checked out the song, gave it a listen, and give some feedback. Let us know what you think of the song. I absolutely love it. I think it's got a great jam to it. I think the music video is really cool too. Came out awesome. Here's the short clip of the video to play us out. Thanks so much for watching this series, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
So got the good times, sunshine foretell I start to fade, skinny dipping in the moonlight, just like beach bum renegades. Dial up your rabble for a minute, throw a margarita in.
Been a senorita on the dance floor.
Let's make it all